Well, thankfully, Tucker, my animal wildlife alert watchdog, is really terrible at his job because he had no idea that there was a big old bull elk walking right up here in the direction that we were filming. So I'm gonna shut all this off and I'm gonna get quiet. It is, ooh, here he comes. All right, here we go. Over the past few months, Kayla and I have been traveling throughout some of the most remote and rugged country that Canada has to offer. We've gone to some really amazing places, all in the spirit of bringing the Bible to life in a way that makes sense and in a way that's interesting and keeps people's attention. So far, it has been amazing. By the way, if you don't know, I'm Thad, and this is the Journey Church Online. We're about to dive into lesson number 13 in our Sermon on the Mount series. Let's go. Somewhere along the way, we learned about the first telegraph line to connect Alaska with the lower mainland. It was really a cool thing to learn about. It was a crazy undertaking to physically connect these two areas with a continuous, unbroken telegraph wire. Over 2,000 miles of cable was actually laid underwater along the coastlines. And then there was hundreds and hundreds of miles of cables that were laid inland, going up and over some of the most rugged terrain imaginable. Years and years of effort went into this project, followed by years of repairing and refining things to try and adapt to the harsh ocean currents and then the massive snowfall inland. Well, the perseverance paid off because in the early 1900s, the messages started to flow back and forth from Washington State all the way up north to Alaska. Messages that used to take months or more were now arriving in just minutes. It's not hard to imagine all the ways that this would have impacted the people living in those remote areas, none of which would have been possible without the dedication and hard work and perseverance of the men and women that stuck with it all those years to ensure that those telegraph lines would actually be completed. In our modern world, it's so easy to completely take for granted how easy it is for us to communicate with each other. How a cell phone works is beyond me. And now, with Starlink, we can be plugged into the communication grid from literally anywhere, and we have been. And how all that works, I have no idea, but I am so grateful for those amazing advances and how easy it is for us to stay plugged in. This week, we're looking at a passage in Matthew chapter 7, verses 7 through 11. It's a passage where Jesus talks about prayer. And I think there's a lot to learn about communicating with God by remembering how hard communication used to be and how easy it is now. So let's take a look at what Jesus says, and then we're going to break it down in just a second. Keep on asking, and you will receive what you ask for. Keep on seeking, and you will find. Keep on knocking, and the door will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and to everyone who knocks, the door will be opened. Then Jesus goes on to say, you parents, if your children ask for a loaf of bread, do you give them a stone instead? Or if they ask for a fish, do you give them a snake? Of course not. So, if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask Him? Well, if you recall earlier in His sermon, Jesus had already talked about prayer. There's a section in there where He started out by teaching people how not to pray. He basically told them, don't pray for show like the overly religious Jews were doing. They're standing on the street corners, making a big fuss of everything, praying really loud. trying to make a scene of how righteous or holy or religious they were. And then he said, likewise, don't pray like the Gentiles are doing either. They pray to their gods, and they seem to have these certain words or phrases that they just say over and over, like it's some sort of magic word to get their God to do what they want. And then Jesus went on to actually tell them how to pray. We covered all that back in lesson number 10 on prayer and fasting. So if you missed that one, be sure to click the link and go check it out. So now that we know that he talked about how not to pray like the Jews, how not to pray like the Gentiles, he did talk about how you should pray. What is all this other stuff coming up now about asking and seeking and just all this extra talk on prayer? Well, I really think there are some big lessons, really two big lessons from what Jesus highlights in this passage. First, he makes a big point to paint this picture of the kind of people who get their prayers answered. They're the kind of people who keep on asking. They keep looking to God and they keep knocking. And I think it's really important not to get too hung up on thinking about these statements literally. Instead, just keep focused on the kind of person that Jesus is describing. It's a person that perseveres. They stick with it. Kind of like the people that had to work on those first telegraph lines from Washington State to Alaska. They would work and work and wonder if they were ever going to get through to the other side, and they had to stick with it no matter what the day brought. Maybe in their circumstances, they were freezing cold and battling ice and snow. Maybe they were trudging through deep mud and fighting the mosquitoes. For sure they were. Maybe they were seasick out on the ship laying the marine cables. Whatever the circumstances were, they just kept at it. I think that's really the first lesson that Jesus wants us to hear from this particular passage. That no matter what you're going through, no matter how tough your day is or how rough the things are going on in your life, the question is, are you going to stick with it? Are you going to keep talking to God, telling him where you're at, telling him what you need, or are you going to let the noise of the world around you kind of just turn you off and shut you down? Are you going to get tired after praying just once or twice and just throw in the towel and give up? Jesus is saying that the kind of person who gets their prayers answered is somebody that keeps on keeping on. They persevere. They keep asking. They keep seeking. They keep knocking. Well, the second lesson I think Jesus wanted us to learn about prayer is that it's not hard for God to give good gifts to his kids. Compared to how hard it was to put in that first telegraph line, I think we have it pretty easy now. Communication now is incredible. With the push of a couple buttons, we can reach people around the world. And I think that's the way that Jesus wants us to think about God. What looks like putting in a telegraph line to us is like Starlink to God. Jesus gives us this analogy in this passage about parents and kids. He says, look, even you imperfect parents, you know how to give good things to your kids. So why would it be so hard for you to believe that God would know how to give you the good things that you ask for? Well, a lot of people read this passage and get really hung up. They read it like Jesus is giving a guarantee that if you do this and this and this, then it's a guarantee that God will give you what you want. I think it's really important not to look at this passage like a math formula. We have to remember, Jesus was a Jewish rabbi after all, and not an algebra teacher. And everything he's taught on so far in this sermon highlights the kind of character that God wants to develop in his people. The importance of your heart rather than your head, which is, I think, what he's up to here in this passage as well. How is your heart, right? Is it really in your prayers? Do you really want what you're asking for? Will it matter to you tomorrow or next week or next month? Continuing to pray for the same thing over and over an extended period of time is a way of helping us refine what we're thinking. And I think it helps us reflect on what we're really asking for, to ponder and wonder the kind of good things that God would want for us. It helps us slow down and think, like, am I just selfishly praying for what I want over and over? Or is the more I seek and ask and knock and keep going back to the Lord with these prayers, does it refine and shape and change what I'm actually praying for, in line with what God really wanted to give me to begin with? I don't know. I think that might be what Jesus is teaching us here. Well, there's all sorts of great lessons that you could draw from these particular passages and some great discussions to be had. So, whoa, almost fell on my face. So if you're watching this, call 911. No, just kidding, don't do that. I'm all right. Seriously though, if you're watching this, I want to encourage you to do two things. First of all, go to the website, download the free study guide that goes along with this episode. That's an easy one. Second, this one's going to take a little bit more effort, but well worth it. I want you to think about who you could invite to discuss this episode with. In fact, it would be awesome if you thought of somebody and then sent them the link to this video. Then the two of you, or more maybe, get together in person or even on a Zoom and just dive into the study guide together. Woo, the sun came out all of a sudden. It is blazing beautiful. It is cool, but gorgeous. All right, here's the thing. When it comes to being a disciple of Jesus and learning and growing in your relationship with Him and maturing as a disciple, it is not meant to be a solo act. So, who are you going to do it with? What friends are you going to get together with and dig in and study the Word of God with? Who's on your heart? Who's on your mind? Hoping? You're a good helper? Thanks for not scaring off the elk. That was cool. Well, hey, after the last 4 months of exploring and traveling through some really rugged northern Canada territory and Alaska, we are nearing our time to head south. Next week, we're going to be coming to you from somewhere back in the United States. At least that's what we think is the plan. All plans are subject to God's immediate change. But before we get there and before we check out of this place, I want to share some of our favorite scenes over the last few months of the wild and beautiful Northlands of Canada and Alaska. So before you take off, enjoy this little zip around some beautiful country.